may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Alright guys, just in case you were unable to watch the video yesterday, I am going to be testing out these new thumbnails over the next 2 or 3 videos where I include myself on the thumbnail. Like I said in the video yesterday, I noticed that most successful YouTubers, whether or not that's a video game player, a vlogger, another fantasy football YouTuber, they make thumbnails like this, and I don't know if it's just because they have a large ego or if it's because people generally prefer this type of thumbnail. So please let me know what you would rather see, a thumbnail with myself on it or just a thumbnail of the players that I'm going to be talking about, because genuinely what you tell me you want is exactly what we are going to have. I promise you that. And also, I would love to hear who your highest owned wide receivers are in your own Dynasty fantasy football leagues. I know not as many of y'all play in as many leagues as I do. I play in every single Flock Patreon Dynasty league. We have about 10 of those up and going right now. We are about to open up a lot more of those, so I'm excited to be drafting with y'all. I'm excited to possibly get some extra wide receivers that I maybe do not have in my portfolio right now. But we are going to be talking about my 5 highest owned wide receivers in Dynasty in this video. And yeah, let's start it off with a wide receiver that I was so wrong on. I straight up embarrassed myself in offseason to go by talking about this wide receiver as a massive value in almost every single video that I made. And this is Juju Smith-Schuster. Okay, so guys, with Juju, I mean, the reason that I loved him at his Dynasty price point in offseason to go, I'm going to remind everyone, I mean, this was a wide receiver that still cost a good amount. I mean, he was still being drafted in rounds 3 and 4 in our Dynasty Superflex startups. As I was looking at Juju and I was going, you know what? In 2019, he was injured. In 2019, Big Ben was injured at the same time. If we just take a step back, if we look at what Juju Smith-Schuster was able to do in 2017 and 2018 at 20, 21, and 22 years old, this was a wide receiver that was on an historic pace to being one of the best wide receivers of all time. If you look at age-adjusted production, I mean, he was right there with the Mike Evans. He was right there with the Randy Moss and what he was able to do at such a young age. And I know Juju had massive critics. There were a lot of people who were telling me, Mason, pay attention to what Juju is doing off the field. Pay attention to the fact that he is spending this amount of time on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, everything else, growing his own social media brand. And I'll say 2 things here. One, I laughed at the people who told me that. I said, okay, boomer, you clearly don't know how society works in 2020. All of these players are spending a significant amount of time on social media. Juju is not going to let that affect his game in the slightest. He is doing something that is very smart in building his name and making sure that he is going to have a source of income after he is able to retire from the NFL. So I thought Juju was very smart in doing that, and I stand by the fact that I think Juju was making the correct business decision in investing so much time and energy into those social media platforms and growing his own following. But at the same time, I can sit back and I can look at what he was able to accomplish very early on in his NFL career. Look at the fact that he's pretty much not improved at all from his age 20 season. Now that he is 24, and go, you know what? Maybe the boomers were right. I mean, maybe I overlooked something that was a red flag. So with Juju, because he's still only 24 years old, and because he is possibly going to be leaving Pittsburgh, maybe to a more desirable situation, maybe he finds himself on a team that needs an alpha wide receiver, I'm going to be holding Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, currently he's going at the back half of round 5 or the beginning of round 6 of Dynasty startups right now. So we are definitely not shying away from the fact that we were wrong on Juju. I mean, we took a bath, we took a loss on that investment, but I don't think I'm going to be selling him low. I think we are going to be holding him going forward because he is still extremely young. And I think he is going to have a safe role on whatever NFL offense he lands on. The question is, what is the upside going to be? And I just don't think it's going to be as high as we wanted it to be 2 seasons ago. All right, so y'all know after Juju Smith-Schuster, the second highest wide receiver I was on compared to consensus last offseason was actually Calvin Ridley. I was all in on Calvin Ridley becoming the wide receiver 1 for the Atlanta Falcons. I thought that he was quite possibly the second best value in fantasy football drafts at the wide receiver position behind Juju Smith-Schuster. And yeah, I mean, halfway through the year, I was looking at our Calvin Ridley shares as he was like the number 1 overall wide receiver for a good stretch before he suffered the injury. And I was going, okay, we're just printing money. It doesn't matter that we lost out on Juju Smith-Schuster because Calvin Ridley is coming through and saving our season. And I'm going to be completely honest, I was thinking that Ridley was going to be a player that I was selling high on after this season because we can expect the narrative to change that Calvin Ridley is now the wide receiver 1 on the Atlanta Falcons, and people are expecting him to be producing the Julio Jones type numbers. But after the injury, where we saw Calvin Ridley fall off, and people really were not necessarily talking about him as much as they should have been down the stretch in 2020, I think he went from a player that I was planning on selling high to now being a player that I think we are just going to have to hold. The one reason I am not going to be looking to go out there and aggressively trade for more shares is, 1, I already have enough where I can just sit on him where I have him. But 2, we have to also question Matt Ryan and the quarterback situation there going forward, because Matt Ryan now has put up back-to-back years where the efficiency has been absolutely horrendous. And we have to account that into Calvin Ridley's overall upside. So here I'll say I think the ceiling may be a little bit limited with Matt Ryan as the quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. Hopefully they can get an upgrade at the position sometime soon. But Ridley, clearly a top wide receiver at the NFL level. And I cannot wait to see what we have in 2021. Okay. So now our next wide receiver, I'm going to be completely honest. I did not hype him up that much last offseason. I was surprised to see how many leagues we had him in, but I have been hyping him up at the beginning of this offseason. This is going to be Nicole Hardman. Okay, I'll say, I do not remember drafting Nicole Hardman in this many leagues. I mean, I knew I had a ton of Juju Smith-Schuster. I knew I had a ton of Calvin Ridley. But going through and just seeing roster after roster that had Nicole Hardman on it, I was pleasantly surprised, because this is a wide receiver I've said so many times so far in 2021 that I think he is going to be able to take a step up to being close to an every down player for the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, because he is going into year 3. We know that Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs decided to trade up for him in that 2019 NFL draft. And the scouting report behind Nicole Hardman was, you know what? This is a wide receiver that is not polished. I mean, he is not ready to completely dominate the NFL. But what he does have is he has a ton of raw athleticism and he has a ton of upside. And he's going to be a project for whatever team takes him. And then he can turn into a great wide receiver down the line. And yeah, so we are 2 years into the Nicole Hardman experiment. I mean, he has been mainly a disappointment whenever we've seen Sammy Watkins suffer an injury. Whenever we expected Nicole Hardman to get an uptick in snaps, we've seen those targets and those snaps go to players like Demarcus Robinson. But I think based on the fact that Sammy Watkins is not under contract for this team in 2021, the team made that investment into Nicole Hardman. He is going into year 3, which is the year we expected him to be able to take that leap. Everything is lining up for Nicole Hardman to possibly jump up to being that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. Now, I think he is going to be boom and bust with his big plays, but when you are a very young wide receiver attached to Patrick Mahomes, about to see a significant amount of snaps, I think we just naturally have to be excited about that kind of profile. Okay. So now our next wide receiver that we are going to talk about had a great season in 2020 that went under the radar, but I have to be completely honest here. I did not invest into him in the 2020 offseason. I invested into him back in the 2019 offseason when I thought he was a buy low candidate, and this is going to be Corey Davis. So while yes, it looks like maybe we hit on Corey Davis in 2020, I will say the investment that I made into Corey Davis in the majority of these leagues 2 off seasons ago was a lot higher than what his price is currently. I think Davis is going to be a player that is definitely going to be landing spot dependent on whether or not we like him going forward, because he is a wide receiver that profiles to be that ex-alpha wide receiver target hog on whatever NFL offense he's playing with. And he was able to be, I don't want to say dominant when A.J. Brown was out a few games in 2020, but he was able to step up into that wide receiver 1 role and thrive. I'm interested in seeing the amount of money that he gets from a team this offseason, because we know generally these NFL franchises are always willing to give that paycheck to a wide receiver that was selected so high in the NFL draft. Corey Davis was a former top 5 pick by the Tennessee Titans back in 2017. So yeah, it looks like possibly we recouped some of the value that we lost a few off seasons ago. Definitely a player I am not looking to sell at all. Maybe a player that I look to go out there and buy him with the teams I do not have him, because if he lands somewhere nice in 2021, I think he can continue to be a wide receiver 3, possibly a low-end wide receiver 2, and the price you're going to pay for Corey Davis makes that a very nice investment. Okay. So now our last wide receiver that we are going to talk about is a wide receiver that I also was surprised to find on this list, but it's because I have been getting him in a few leagues pretty much every offseason for the past 5 years now, and this is Allen Robinson. Now, I never had a single offseason where I was way overweight on Allen Robinson, where I went out and said, you know what? He is one of the best values in Dynasty at this moment. I'm going to be targeting him aggressively. But I'm kind of pleasantly surprised yet again with A-Rob in the fact that we have him in so many leagues. He's going to be a free agent this offseason. What I would love to see from Allen Robinson is him possibly landing in Detroit if they let go of Kenny Golladay. I mean, I think that would be best case scenario to find himself with Matthew Stafford as an alpha wide receiver 1, because we know Allen Robinson is the type of wide receiver talent that he can get that 30% target share on whatever NFL offense he's on. I've heard a lot of people float out the fact that they want to see him in Green Bay. I'll say I would not like that for my Allen Robinson shares. If he landed in Green Bay, I would be looking to sell, while it would definitely be the best quarterback that he's seen throughout his entire NFL career, because his list of quarterbacks currently are Blake Bortles, Mitchell Trubisky, and Nick Foles. I mean, obviously, Allen Robinson has just had a very difficult time with his quarterback play so far in his NFL career. But I would much prefer him to keep his spot as the bona fide wide receiver 1 and just get a marginal upgrade at the quarterback position. Maybe he would go to a team like Houston with Deshaun Watson if Watson stays there. Now that is also something we would get excited about, but I think that's probably not going to happen. All right. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. As always, if y'all did, go down there, drop that like, leave that comment, subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps us out. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I hope I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow.